New York's Fifth Avenue, the place where the richest families in America would come to flaunt their wealth and outdo one another. The place where grandiose mansions were built, and a robust culture of pomp, fanfare, and glamour was established. Welcome to Schmancy, the place where we talk all things rich, exclusive, and fancy schmancy. Today, we are taking you on a trip to New York City. But not just anywhere in New York City. Today, we're taking you straight to Fifth Avenue. An avenue known for hosting some of the most moneyed families in American history, so much so, that for a period of time it was called Millionaires Row. Located on Manhattan Island, along midtown Fifth Avenue, well into the eastern borders of Central Park, Millionaires Row got its start in the mid-1800s, when it became trendy for the wealthy to build their mansions close to the Astors on Fifth Avenue and 34th Street. It wasn't until the later part of the century when the millionaires further ventured into midtown and then further up into the Upper East Side, that the avenue was coined the term Millionaires Row. Today, though still a very wealthy part of Manhattan, Millionaires Row has taken a backseat to Billionaires Row, and much of the extravagant homes on Fifth Avenue have been demolished. However, there are a few that still remain standing. And if you've got a few minutes to spare, you're welcome to come along with us on our tour of the most memorable, most outstanding mansions that existed in the history of this most swanky avenue. Our tour will start in Midtown Fifth Avenue, taking you all the way into the Upper East Side to a section they call Carnegie Hill. So without further delay, here are the 11 most opulent mansions on Millionaires Row. Number 1. House of Mansions. This luxurious castle-like structure on Fifth Avenue between 41st and 42nd Street, was built as a collection of 11 separate homes, all under one roof. Completed in 1856 by developer George Higgins, it was designed to lure the wealthy to the then rural neighborhood of Midtown East, as well as provide a drastic alternative to the cookie-cutter brownstones that were cropping up all over the city. However, the rich back then were an extremely stubborn bunch. No matter how beautiful or upscale these townhomes may have been, they refused to budge from the comfortable enclaves of single-family housing in Lower Fifth Avenue. Though each unit would easily be snatched up in today's market, in 1856, no one cared much for life in the underdeveloped Midtown Fifth Avenue. And therefore, no one moved in. By 1860, Higgins' vision was down the drain, and he sold the property to Rutgers Female College. By the time of the Gilded Age, when the wealthy finally did start moving into Midtown and Upper Fifth Avenue, the estate was already in its demolition phase. Eventually, in stages, the castle was no more. Today, you will find in its place a slew of skyscrapers, and retail shops across from the New York Public Library. Number 2. Petit Chateau. This French Renaissance-style mansion was completed in 1882, for William K. Vanderbilt, and his wife Alva. Located at 660 Fifth Avenue on the northwest corner of Fifth Avenue and 52nd Street, it was revolutionary at the time, as it was one of the few homes built in white limestone, compared to the multitude of drab brownstones that lined the avenue. The chateauesque style mansion became one of the most avant-garde in New York City and reflected Alva's love of all things French. It was also the place where she made her mark on New York society by hosting her costly masquerade ball of 1,000+ guests, and expertly had the Mrs. Astor practically begging for an invitation. Sold in 1926 to a real estate developer, Petit Chateau was demolished shortly after that in 1927. Today, you will find an office tower formerly owned by Jared Kushner taking up the width of the block, with stores such as Zara and Hollister standing in its place. Number 3. The Cornelius Vanderbilt II House. This 1883 chateauesque mansion for Cornelius Vanderbilt II was completed a year after his little brother William's mansion. The 6-story, 130-room home was located further up the avenue, at 1 West 57th Street, directly across Grand Army Plaza. Extremely proficient at spending away the family fortune, this Vanderbilt outdid the entire fleet of New York millionaires, by further expanding the home in 1893, and making it the largest residence ever built in New York City history. He accomplished the same thing with the Breakers, his monstrosity of a summer cottage in Newport. The Fifth Avenue mansion, requiring a staff of 37 servants, boasted a 2-story ballroom, a 2-story dining room, and a conservatory, among its plethora of elaborate rooms. As the neighborhood became full-on commercial by the Roaring Twenties, the family was forced to sell the mansion to real estate developers, and it was demolished in 1926, to make way for today's Bergdorf Goodman. You can find its original front gates on East 105th Street, at the entrance to the Central Park Conservatory Garden, and one of its mantelpieces at the Met Museum. Number 4. The Mrs. William B. Astor House. Completed in 1896, this Renaissance Revival mansion was an upgrade from the previous drab brownstone on 34th Street occupied by the recently widowed Mrs. Caroline Astor. The same brownstone that was raised in order to make way for the Astoria side of the original Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Located at 840 and 841 Fifth Avenue, on the northeast corner of 65th Street, her new mansion was a duplex, with one side for herself, and the other for her son John Jacob Astor IV. The socially obsessed gatekeeper made sure her new Upper East Side mansion outdid those built years earlier by her new money rivals, the Vanderbilts. Among many new features, the home included a marble Great Hall, a large cantilevered staircase, and a ballroom large enough to entertain 1,200 guests. Mrs. Astor would continue to throw her lavish parties here as well. But as the years went on, instead of growing her exclusive list of 400 to accommodate her larger ballroom, it began to dwindle, leaving her with a lot of wasted effort and wasted food. After her death in 1908, and her son's death on the Titanic, the short-lived double mansion was sold off to developers, and demolished in 1926. Today the Temple Emmanuel of New York sits on the site. Number 5. The Henry Clay Frick House. This industrialist hailing from Pittsburgh, truly outdid himself with his new Millionaire's Row mansion. After severing ties with ex-business partner Andrew Carnegie, Henry Clay Frick moved to New York, and in 1914, he built a mansion large enough to blow his old mansion in Pittsburgh out of the park. The brand new Beaux-Arts mansion between 70th and 71st Street took up half the block between 5th and Madison. It required 27 servants to run the household, and housed a total of 61 rooms, as well as Frick's extensive art collection. After the death of Henry Clay Frick and his widow, the mansion and all of its contents were transformed into a public art museum, which stands today as the Frick Collection. Number 6. The William A. Clark House. Moving along Millionaires Row, we'll come to the William A. Clark House on the northeast corner of 77th Street. Otherwise known as Clark's Folly, the Beaux-Arts somewhat chateau-esque mansion contained 121 rooms, which included 4 art galleries, a swimming pool, a concealed garage, and a private underground railroad to bring in coal for heat. Built between 1897 and 1911 by William A. Clark, a copper baron and former senator from Montana, it was reported that he had purchased a quarry and a bronze foundry just for the construction of the home, and used his private railroad to transport building materials directly to the site. Even more outlandish was the gaudy imbalanced end result, with a 3-story tower protruding from the right side of the roof that was visible from almost anywhere in Central Park. After Clark's death in 1925, his widow and daughter sold the mansion to a developer, who had it demolished in 1927 and replaced with the luxury apartment building you will find today. Sadly, his over-the-top mansion didn't even last 20 years after it was completed. Number 7. The Isaac Vail Brokaw Mansion. Completed in 1890 for clothing merchant Isaac Vail Brokaw, this chateau-esque style mansion at 5th Avenue and 79th Street is known to have come with a 7-foot secret safe, as well as a moat. After Brokaw's death, his eldest son George would attempt to have the home demolished several times. However, his siblings who owned the 3 mansions next door, would not have it, and always saw to it that the courts agreed. After George's death, his siblings rounded up the mansions and sold them off to the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. 2 decades later, the institute sold the estate to developers eager to raise everything in replacement for something more profitable. Though the historic estate had already been approved for landmark status, there were no laws at the time protecting landmarks from demolition. Thus, even though the community rallied to protect the estate, it was quite painful watching it all succumb to the wrecking ball, on a dreadful weekend in April of 1965. Just 7 days later, after much public outcry, New York's mayor signed the New York City Landmarks Law, which finally provided legal protection for the city's treasured buildings. As for the mansion's replacement, well, there you have it. Shall we say it was a major improvement? We'll let you be the judge of that. Number 8. The Benjamin N. Duke House. Completed in 1901 alongside a string of 3 other mansions, this red brick and limestone mansion at the corner of 5th Avenue and 82nd wasn't built for anyone specific. However, shortly after it went up, it was snatched up by Benjamin N. Duke, the energy and tobacco magnate. His brother James B. Duke later purchased it, then passed it on to Benjamin's son, and so on and so forth. In other words, the home had become a staple in the Duke family for over a century. One can clearly see why, as historians say it's one of the finest examples of the Beaux-Arts style of architecture in the city. Though its siblings from the past have since been demolished, today you can still find this private residence standing by itself, right across from the Met Museum. It is now owned by Mexican telecom magnate, Carlos Slim, and last we heard, he wanted $80 million for it. Number 9. The Carnegie Mansion. Carnegie Hill, the neighborhood this colossal Georgian revival mansion resides, was actually named after it. Completed in 1905, it was actually home to steel magnate Andrew Carnegie and his family. The gated complex taking up half the block includes the 64-room mansion, an enclosed lawn open to the public, a small garden, as well as the townhouse to its right, which was later purchased for Carnegie's daughter. Unlike the ostentatious shrines of decadence built by his counterparts on Millionaires' Row, Carnegie wanted the simplest, most understated, and roomiest home in New York. And well, this is what he got. After his death in 1919, his wife Louise continued to live in the mansion until her death in 1946. The Carnegie Corporation later gifted the property to the Smithsonian in 1972. Today, the Carnegie Mansion located on 5th Avenue and 91st Street is known as the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum. Number 10. The Warburg House. At the corner of 5th Avenue and 92nd Street is this 6-story French Gothic revival mansion that was built in 1908 for a prominent Jewish financier named Felix Warburg. After Mr. Warburg's death in 1937, his widow could no longer afford the high property taxes, and so she eventually gifted the mansion as a permanent home to the Jewish Museum, which opened to the public in 1947. What's unique about this mansion is that the original was not as big as what you see today. In the years between 1990 and 1993, it underwent an extensive renovation and expansion that doubled the size of the museum. The 7-story addition had the same exact limestone Gothic revival facade as the original, giving it all a seamless appearance. The museum still stands today and you can visit year-round. And last we have arrived at the top of Millionaires' Row with number 11, the WILLARD D. Strake House. Located on 5th Avenue and 94th, 20 blocks removed from the flashy Gilded Age mansions of the Nouveau Riche, this refined brick home was built for financier Willard Straight and his wife Dorothy Payne Whitney, one of the richest heiresses in the country at the time. Completed in 1915, they too wanted something less flashy. In the end, it is not only about the classic lines and its stately black shutters, but it is also about the row of porthole windows across the top that make this neo-Georgian building so distinguished. Straight died only 3 years after the home was finished, and his widow eventually remarried and sold the home. After being the headquarters for the Audubon Society, and then the International Center of Photography, the home was purchased by hedge fund billionaire Bruce Kovner in 2001, who in turn invested $10 million renovating it back to a private residence. As of today, the billionaire still owns the property. And that's it for the 11 most opulent mansions on Manhattan's Millionaire Row. So, which of these did you like the most? Have you any future plans to take a tour of 5th Avenue to catch a glimpse of these sights? Are there any others on the strip that you feel should have made this list? Anyway, if there's anything else you would like to mention about this topic, feel free to share it with us in the comments below. Furthermore, if you got any value out of this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and click on the bell icon so you never miss out on another video. With that said, we'd like to thank you for watching. And we'll see each other next time.